Welcome back. Now we're going to deepen our understanding of how lesson planning actually drives student learning. Earlier, we talked about rigor in a general sense. Now we're going to look at where rigor actually lives inside a lesson objective. Because one of the most important things teachers learn over time is this: not all objectives demand the same kind of thinking. And if we don't learn how to judge the level of thinking inside an objective, it becomes very easy to accidentally design lessons that are active, but not intellectually rigorous. One tool teachers use to analyze objectives is the ABCD model, as you can see on the screen: audience, behavior, condition, and degree. I'm going to have a few voices help us read each component out loud, and then we'll unpack what each part actually means instructionally. At this point, I would call on four people to read. Can someone read the audience? Behavior, condition? And while I read, I would track with the cursor to emphasize keywords vocally, nod and affirm, and all those things. Okay, so now let's make sense of what we just read, because this is where lesson integrity starts to become visible. The audience tells us who is learning. That part is usually straightforward. But even here, we should already be thinking instructionally. Who are the learners? What prior knowledge, language, and experiences are they bringing into the lesson? Next, we have behavior. Behavior is the instructional center of gravity because behavior tells us what students are actually doing cognitively. And this is where rigor really starts to show up. If the behavior is identify or list or recall, students are primarily retrieving information. But if students are asked to explain, model, construct, argue, or justify, now students are engaging in deeper reasoning and sense making. So rigor is not about making work harder. I want to really make that plain. Rigor is about the level of thinking the lesson demands from all students, and we really have to believe that the students can learn. There will be a huge gap between what the students are able to do and what you believe they can do. So it's not about making work harder. It's about the level of cognition you want them to engage in. And when the students show up in your classroom, they can already engage in all of it. They've been creative since they were two, right? They've been evaluating their environment since they were two. So it's not like, oh, these kids don't have practice, or oh, these kids didn't have this in the previous class. Don't even worry about that. As long as they're Homo sapien, they can engage in higher order thinking. Condition tells us the circumstances under which students perform the learning. This includes tools, supports, materials, scaffolds, collaboration structures, or constraints. And instructionally, this matters because access matters, right? Especially for multilingual learners and students with exceptionalities. A strong lesson doesn't just ask students to think deeply, it also creates pathways that allow students to engage in the thinking itself. And then finally, degree tells us how we support students and how we want them to perform, right? This is what makes the learning measurable. Degree helps clarify what counts as evidence that learning actually happened. So when we analyze objectives this way, we're not just filling out boxes. We're making instructional decisions about cognition, rigor, access, and evidence of learning. That's what lesson integrity really is. Alignment means the thinking in the objective, the thinking in the lesson, and the thinking in the assessment all match. So now let's connect this objective to the assessment because this is where alignment either holds or breaks apart. Students are being asked to identify what has collided and then determine whether damage has occurred and then describe what happens at different time points during the collision. Now, at first glance, this might look like a simple recall. But cognitively, students are actually doing much more than remembering facts, right? Students have to observe carefully, infer what may have happened during the collision, analyze changes in materials over time, and then use evidence from the phenomenon to support their explanations. This is science. This is science at its core. That's important because science is not just about naming objects. Science is about reasoning through interactions, forces, and changes that may not be directly visible. And one of the key characteristics of science is to make the natural unvisible, what is naturally invisible, visible, right? So even though the task may appear simple on the surface, the cognitive demand is actually moving students towards analysis, explanation, and evidence-based reasoning. And this is why teachers have to learn how to judge rigor beyond just the worksheet or the task, right? So now we can ask a much more important instructional question. Does the behavior in the objective actually match the thinking students are being asked to do in the assessment? Because if the objective says develop a model or construct an explanation or analyze interactions, but the assessment only asks students to label, define, or identify, then the alignment is lost and you haven't taught what you think you've taught. And when alignment breaks down, lesson integrity breaks because the lesson may appear rigorous, but the students are not actually being assessed on the level of thinking the objective has promised. So, to conclude, the ABCD model isn't just about writing objectives. It's about making sure the thinking we plan for, the thinking students practice, and the thinking we assess all cognitively match. That's what creates integrity within your lesson. Thank you.